Okay guys, this is part 2. In this video, we're gonna wrap all of our chipboard pieces in black cardstock. And after that, we're gonna decorate them in the papers from the Elegance collection. And let's start with the bottom. That is the Y piece. You wanna be able to fold some of the cardstock over the edges on each side. So you're gonna place your chipboard right in the middle of your paper. I just covered one side of the chipboard completely in glue and laid it on my cardstock. And then we're softening up the cardstock so it's gonna be easier to fold. Then we're gonna add some score tape to the cardstock that is sticking out. Now remember to burnish with your bone folder before adding your glue. And then fold that over the edge of the chipboard and press that down and burnish with your bone folder. And then do the same thing on the other side. And now the Y piece is done. So moving on to the I piece. Place your tape along the edges of your chipboard and a couple of strips across. Then burnish that with your bone folder and add your glue in all that empty space in between the tape. Then place that at the bottom of your cardstock so all the edges line up and give that a good burnish. Most of these pieces only have one edge that needs to be covered because the other ones aren't going to be visible. So you want to fold the cardstock over that edge that is going to be visible. So you're going to add your tape and your glue to the rest of the cardstock. And then you're going to pull it over the edge and press it down and give that a good burnish. Then we just need to cover up the last bit of the chipboard. So add your score tape to the chipboard, burnish, and then add your glue. And then place the cardstock so the edges of the cardstock doesn't overlap, and give that a good burnish, and then turn it around, and then you can just cut off the excess cardstock with your craft knife, like so. And then you're gonna take your pencil and write a little discreet I at the bottom. Not too hard, just so you can see which piece you have. And then with the J piece, we're gonna do the same thing as we did with the I piece. Place the score tape along the edges of your chipboard and burnish. And then fill in all the rest of the chipboard with glue. Place it on the cardstock so the bottom and the sides line up. And give that a good burnish. And as we did before, we're going to add some score tape to the rest of the cardstock and burnish. And then add some glue. And pull that over the edge of the chipboard. Burnish again. Cover the rest of the chipboard with score tape and glue. Then place a new sheet of cardstock, and the edges shouldn't be overlapping. Then burnish that and cut off the excess. And then write a little J in the corner. And then we're going to do the R piece. We only want to cover one side and then the edge on the short side. So we're just going to use the R piece to see how much we need and then cut off the excess cardstock. Then we're going to add our tape to the chipboard as we did with the other pieces, and then our glue. And then we're going to place it on the cardstock so the bottom and the sides line up and give that a good burnish. And then we can do the rest of the cardstock that is sticking out. Tape, burnish, glue, and then pull and fold. And burnish that to the other side and write R in the corner. That was some of the easy ones. Then we're going to do the A pieces, and they need to be covered completely, but we're going to start at one side. Add your tape and burnish, and then add your glue and place that piece on the cardstock so you have plenty of room all the way around. Cut off that excess piece of cardstock, and we are going to use that for covering up the other side. I'm just going to borrow the other A piece to see exactly how much we need. We want the cardstock to be just a tiny bit smaller than the chipboard, just to make sure that it's not gonna go over the edges. And as you can see just a tiny bit of the chipboard under the cardstock. Then we need to cut off the corners so we can wrap the edges. And you need to cut about 1/8 of an inch from the corners of your chipboard. And this corner is a little bit more tricky. But try to fold the cardstock over the edges to see if you need to take more off. And then we're just going to soften up all of our cardstock so it will be easier to fold. Then we're going to add our score tape to all of those flaps. A strip up against the chipboard and a strip at the edge. And burnish that down. And add some glue. And then pull that over the edges and press that down to the other side. Give that a good burnish and use your bone folder to kind of press in the corners. And do that to all of the 4 flaps. So you have all of the edges covered. And I'm sorry about that noise. My son is here playing with some cardboard. But now we just need to add the piece of cardstock we cut out before. So add your score tape to the edges all the way around and burnish that. Then peel off all the anti-stick strips and add your glue and then place that on the chipboard piece and burnish that real good. And that was one of the A's. Now we just need to do the other one, but remember to do it opposite so they're gonna mirror each other. But other than that, just do the exact same thing. Cut off that excess piece of cardstock and cut it a tiny bit smaller than your chipboard piece. Now you can add your score tape to the chipboard all the way around the edge and a couple of strips across. And remember to do this on the right side of the chipboard. Then add your glue and place that chipboard on the big piece of cardstock and burnish. Cut off the corners like we did before. Soften the cardstock. Add your score tape all the way around on all the 4 flaps. And give them a good burnish. Then you can add your glue and start folding the flaps over the edges. I'm starting with the 2 biggest ones and then doing the smaller ones after. Remember to push in the corners with your bone folder. And now the last flap. You can see I cut off a little too much of my corner, but that is okay because we are going to cover up with the other piece of cardstock. And again, be sure to check that you put your score tape onto the right side of the paper. I have made that mistake a couple of times. But yeah, add your tape and your glue and place that piece over your chipboard and burnish that with your bone folder. And please don't mind all the baby noises in the background. And we're going to write a little A on that piece as well. And then we're going to do some of the more tricky pieces. I'm starting with B. Place your score tape along the edges and a couple of strips across. Then burnish and peel off all the anti-stick pieces. Fill in the rest with glue. And then place it exactly like I am doing right now. You want the edges in the corner to line up. And then you're going to give that a good burnish. And then you need to make a cut with your craft knife against the shirt side on the chipboard. And only there. This is how we're going to get a nice clean edge. Then you're going to flip that B piece over without tearing the cardstock. So do it carefully. And now when we have softened up the cardstock, we're going to cover the other side of the chipboard with our score tape and our glue. And then we're going to flip it over again and give that a good burnish. And then just cut off all of that excess cardstock. And now you have one clean piece. And then we're going to write a little B in the corner. Then we're going to take the D piece and we're going to place it over here. We don't want to waste any cardstock, so we are going to fit in as many pieces as possible. Add your adhesive to the D piece and place it like this. And burnish with your bone folder. And then we need to cut again, but only on this side of the chipboard. And then just a tiny bit under where you want the cardstock to fold. And then you're going to flip that piece over to soften up the paper. And then you can add your score tape and give that a burnish. And then your glue. And then flip it over again and burnish. And then you can cut off all the excess cardstock. And that is piece D. And then we have F, and we can just fit that in over here. Check to see if you have enough cardstock so that you can flip it over. And then add your score tape and your glue. Place it on the cardstock and burnish. And then we're going to cut it loose at the bottom and on the side. And a tiny bit under where we want it to fold. And then flip it over. Oh, I'm just going to cut this loose. Flip it over to soften the paper and cover the other side with tape and glue. Flip it over and burnish. And then cut off the excess cardstock with your craft knife. And write F. Then we're going to do the little G piece, score tape and glue. And then we're going to place that right here. Cut it loose on the short side and a tiny bit under the fold. And then flip it over to soften the paper. Add your score tape to the other side, burnish that, and then some glue, and flip it over again and burnish. And then we can cut that out like so. And that was G. And we can still fit in a small piece here, so we are going to do the H. Cover one side with score tape and glue and place it on your cardstock. Burnish and cut it loose on the side and right under the fold. Then flip it over to soften the cardstock and cover the other side with tape and glue. Flip it over again and burnish. And cut off the excess cardstock. And be careful at the pointy end. And that was the H piece. So we are going to write a little H in the corner. And then for the C, we're going to place that here. So we need to add our score tape and burnish that down. And then our glue. And then we can place it so the edges line up in the corner. And give that a good burnish. Then we need to cut it loose at the short side and a tiny bit where we want the fold. Then we're going to fold it to soften up the paper before adding our adhesives. And then we can put on our score tape and burnish, and then add our glue and fold again and burnish that down. And then we're going to cut it out from the cardstock. I'm cutting against the edges of the chipboard and trying not to cut too much into the rest of the cardstock. And then we have our C piece. So we're going to put a little C in the corner. And then for the E, it fits right here. So we're going to do the same. Add our score tape and then our glue. And then we can place that on the cardstock like this. Then we need to cut it loose at the bottom and on the short side, like so, and at the fold. And then we just need to trim off a bit at the long side. And then we can flip it over, add all of our score tape, burnish that down, and then add our glue and flip it again and press it down and burnish. And then we're going to cut it out from the cardstock. Again, just cutting against the chipboard. And then we're going to write a little E. And then for the Q, that needs to be wrapped up completely. So we're going to add our score tape to one side and burnish. Peel off the anti-sticks and add our glue. And then place it on the cardstock with some excess cardstock around the edges. Then we're going to cut off the corners, about 1/8 of an inch from the corners of the chipboard. Then add our score tape on all of the flaps and burnish. Then add our glue to one flap at a time, and I'm starting with the two long sides. Then use your bone folder to press in the corners and fold in the short pieces. Then we're gonna write a little Q in the corner. We still need to cover up the other side. I just found a piece in my scraps. I just need to cut it down to size. I want it to be a little bit smaller than the piece of chipboard so it doesn't go over the edges. When you have your piece, cover it in squirt tape and glue, and then place it on your chipboard and burnish with your bone folder. And that was the Q piece. And then we're going to do the L, and we want to cover up one of the long edges. So we're going to add our squirt tape and burnish that, and then some glue, and place it in the corner of our cardstock and burnish with your bone folder. Cut up against the short side, then fold it over to soften up the paper. Then we can add our score tape and glue to the other side of the chipboard. Fold that over and burnish, and then cut it loose from the rest of the cardstock. And write an L in the corner. And then I wanted to do the M piece, but I accidentally cut on the wrong side, and then I tried to do it again. And after I glued it on, I realized I didn't have room enough to flip it over. So now we are going to do the P pieces instead. So cover all of them up with score tape along the edges on both sides. Burnish. And add the glue. Press it down, and I am just doing all three at once, like so. Then burnish and cut along the long sides. Remove the anti-stick pieces and fill in with glue. Then flip it over and burnish, and do that to the other two pieces as well. Cut them free and add the glue and flip it over, burnish, and then the last piece, cut it loose, add the glue and flip it over and burnish. And then we can cut out all three pieces. Just cut off all of that excess cardstock and write a P on all three. Then we can do the S's. We only need to cover them on one side and one of the short edges. So we're gonna add the score tape and the glue. Then we're gonna place it on the cardstock as close to the edges as we can and burnish. Cut along the long side and flip that over. And then we can just cut off all of that excess cardstock that we don't need. And then we're just gonna cut the last piece so we can flip that little bit of cardstock over. And I just realized that I didn't have to cover the whole piece in score tape, but it doesn't really matter. We are gonna glue it down on the inside of the drawer anyways. So we are just gonna cover this with glue and fold it over the edge. Then we're gonna do the other one, and the rest of this piece is just big enough to fit. So add your glue and place your chipboard. And like before, fold over that little flap. And then we have our two S pieces. Then we're gonna make the T, and that only has to be covered on one side, so that's an easy one. Just add your glue and place it on a piece of cardstock and just cut off all of the excess cardstock, and that is done. And then the K piece, we have to wrap one of the short edges, so you're gonna add your tape, burnish, and add your glue. And then you're gonna place it on a piece of cardstock in the corner and make a cut along one of the long sides. Add your score tape and burnish and add your glue and flip it over. Press that down and burnish and cut off the excess cardstock. And write a little K in the corner. And then the O, we are going to place that so we can fold over the one of the short edges. So cut along one of the long edges, cover the other side with score tape and glue, and then fold it over, press it down, and cut it loose from the cardstock and write a little O in the corner. And then the end piece. We're going to cover both sides and one of the long edges. So add your adhesives, place it on the cardstock, burnish and add your adhesives to the other side. Then flip that over, burnish again and cut it loose and write a little N. Then we're going to try the M piece one more time. And we need to cover two sides and one of the long edges on this as well. So place that on your cardstock after you've added the adhesives, of course. Make sure that it is cut loose from both the short ends. Then fold it over and cut it loose from the cardstock. And that was M. And now we only need the pieces for our drawer. So we're going to start with the U piece, that is the bottom. And that needs to be covered completely. So we're going to start with one side, add your adhesives, and place it on a piece of cardstock so you have a lot of excess cardstock around the edges. And cut off what you don't need. Then we're going to cut off the corners like we did on the other pieces. 1/8 of an inch from the corners of the chipboard, like so. Then place the square tape on all of the small flaps. One strip along the chipboard and one along the edge, and burnish that. Then take one flap at a time, add your glue, fold that over, and I am doing the short sides first this time. And then use your bone folder to press in all of the corners. Add your glue to the other two flaps and fold them in and burnish with your bone folder. And then we need a piece of cardstock for the other side. So I am just going to cut a piece down to size. And again, I want it to be a tiny bit smaller than the piece of chipboard so the cardstock does not go over the edges. And I am just using the piece of chipboard to measure. Then add the square tape to the piece of cardstock and the glue and place that on your chipboard and burnish with your bone folder. And that was the U piece. And then for the W's, we need to cover both sides and one of the long edges. So add your adhesives and place it on your cardstock. Make sure that both of the short edges are cut loose. Then add your adhesives to the other side and fold that over. Burnish with your bone folder and cut it loose. And write a little W. And then just do the same thing with the other piece. And write a W on that as well. And the same thing with the V piece, that is the back of the drawer. And as the W's, this needs to be covered on both sides and one of the long edges. So when you have placed it on your cardstock, you need to cut along the short edge and add your adhesive to the other side. Flip that over, cut it loose, and that was the V. And now for the very last piece before the fun begins. That is the X piece, and that is the front of our drawer. That needs to be covered completely, but we are not going to glue down the inside because we need to put something through the drawer. So that needs to be covered up. But we're going to place the chipboard on a piece of cardstock so we have some excess cardstock all around the edges. Then we're going to cut off the corners with 1/8 of an inch to the corners of the chipboard and soften up all of the cardstock to make them easier to fold. And then we're going to add our score tape on every flap, 2 strips on each, and burnish all of them. Then we're going to add our glue to one flap at a time. I'm starting with the long edges. Fold them over and burnish with your bone folder. Then use your bone folder to press in the corners on the short edges. Add your glue to the shirt flaps and fold them over as well, and burnish with your bone folder. And then we're going to cut down a piece of cardstock to fit on the inside. And that needs to be a tiny bit smaller than the chipboard itself. And we're going to write an X on that. And then we're just going to place a tiny bit of score tape in the middle and put it on our chipboard just so we don't lose it. And then we are going to take the Elegance collection and we're going to get all of the pieces ready that needs to be covered in those beautiful papers. There is a list of those in the description below, but I'm just going to go over them. It's the A pieces, the I, J, K, L, M, N, the O, the P's, the Q, and the X. And we're going to start with the A's. And for those, we are going to use sheet 11 and 12. And they look like this. And this is what they look like on the back. And we're going to use both of those. And we're going to start with the piece that's going to be on the left side on the disc organizer. Place that on the back of the paper in the bottom right corner and use your pencil to draw a line around it. Then we're going to cut that out from the paper. And we're going to cut off just a little bit more so the piece is just slightly smaller than our chipboard. And then we're going to cut out a piece for the other one. So we're just going to copy the one we have. And this time we're going to do it on the left bottom corner from the back of the paper. And I am laying my metal ruler up against the paper and cutting along the ruler. Then we just need to cut off the end. And I'm just using my other piece to measure. And now we have both pieces, we just need to glue them on. But before we do that, remember to ink the edges with your black ink. I forgot to do it on my pieces, but I did it after. And it is a lot easier to do it before. But anyway, when you have covered your piece completely in glue, you're going to put it on your chipboard. And make sure that you have it on straight. And here I am inking my edges after I've glued them on. I didn't burnish all of my edges, so it was doable, but not easy. But yeah, burnish the paper and then do the same thing with the other piece. And now we have our sides. And for the eyepiece, we're going to take sheet 3. It looks like this. And for the other side, we're going to take sheet 5. And it looks like this. And let's start with sheet number 5 for the outside. Get rid of that white strip at the top. Then use your eyepiece to measure how much you need and cut. And then for the inside, take the other sheet and again get rid of that white strip at the top. And then we're gonna cheat a little because I don't really like to waste any paper. And we're not really gonna be able to see the bottom of this. So we're not gonna cover it completely. I'm not gonna measure anything here. I'm just gonna cut it on the left side of the 5th strip of roses so that the pink strip is gonna be at the top of my piece. I guess I am going just a little bit over 5 inches. And this is what we have. So we are gonna ink the edges. And then we're gonna start with the back. Add your glue all over that striped side of the paper and place it on the back of your chipboard. Be sure you don't have it upside down. You want the wrapped edge on top. And then burnish all of the paper. And then for the inside, add your glue to the side with all the roses and place it on your chipboard so that pink strip is on top, the one that is whole, and burnish. Then we're going to take sheet number 4 for the J piece. And this time I'm going to use the side with all the roses on. And I'm cutting that at about 4.5 from the bottom. Again, I don't want to waste any paper and you can't really see the bottom, so it doesn't need to cover it up completely. Ink the edges and add your glue to the side with all the flower stripes, I guess. And then place it at the top of your J piece and burnish. And then for piece K and L, we are going to use sheet number 9, and it looks like this. I am cutting it at 5 1/4 from the bottom. And then I'm just using the K piece to measure how much I need. And I'm using the rest of the piece for the L, and I'm using the L piece again to measure how much I need. And they fit perfectly, so we're gonna ink the edges and adding our glue to the L piece, placing it so the covered edge is at the top, and burnish. And then for the K piece, again the covered edge needs to be at the top, and burnish. Then we're going to do piece O and M, and we're going to use the rest of the sheet to cover them. Again, I am using my pieces to see how much I need, and I'm starting with O. We need to cut off a bit more so it fits, like so. And then for the M, again measuring with my chipboard piece. And when they both fit, we're going to ink the edges. And then we're going to add the glue to the striped side of the L piece and place that on our chipboard and burnish. And same thing with the O. Place that on the chipboard and burnish with your bone folder. Then we're going to use the rest of this sheet for the N and the 3 piece. And we are starting with the N. I'm going to cut it right next to that thin pink stripe. And then I'm going to use the N piece to measure again how much I need. And then I just need to cut off the excess. Perfect fit. Then we're going to cut off a strip for the 3 piece, and I want the flower strip to be right in the middle of them. And that actually fits perfect with the pink stripes. So we're just going to cut up against each side of those, and then they should fit to your piece. You just need to cut them in length. And then you can ink all of your pieces. And then we're going to do the N. And I want the flower strip to be on top, like so. And then we can just glue down all of the piece. And remember to burnish. Now the Q and X we're going to cover in the next video, where we will be putting the desk organizer together. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you are enjoying this tutorial. Please subscribe to my channel and click the bell to be notified about my upcoming videos. Happy crafting!